Hi, Tekken 8 sucks. It's the video. Thank you. Goodbye. Good night. Okay. No. Let's talk about Tekken 8. I'm off this side of the screen now. Let's talk about Tekken 8 and why it actually sucks. Hold on, I'm off the screen again so I can see my audio levels. So I've tried recording this video 7 times. I've recorded it 7 different ways, multiple different formats. I'm here now. I'm recording it. And the reason why is because this has been an ever-evolving problem. And for those of you that don't know exactly what's going on, we'll get to it in a minute because the preamble is pretty important. I know that there are a few of you who are just playing the game and maybe not really following like what the whole uptick in discussion on Season 2 and this May and the Doom posting is all about. And so when I've been trying to record these videos, I've been thinking, how do we talk about this in a constructive way? Because what a lot of people are doing is they're talking about like the boycott, they're talking about themselves and why they're not participating in the boycott, they're talking about how Bandai Namco's betrayed them and all of these other things. But I don't think there's been a lot of thought on why this happened. I don't think a lot of creators have really gotten down, sat there and thought, hold on, I'm going to sit down for this. I'm not even on the screen. Why did this happen? Yeah, I'm not on the screen. This bit isn't working. And I want to talk about that. And sort of like how we got here and why all of these changes happened and how it can potentially be fixed, because I actually don't think that it's completely lost. I think there's a good chance it is. But I think there is a path, an avenue to be able to fix this, because there is a pattern. There is rhyme or reason behind what Bandai Namco is doing, if you can believe it. And I hope that when I explain it in this video, you'll come to more of an understanding as to why Five Fox Fury exists. So let's start with what exactly is going on. The problem right now, and I'll keep this brief, the problem with Tekken 8 is it feels like, I'm not saying this is what happens, it feels like they've doubled down on offense, because characters now have moves like, well, the one we just said, Five Fox Fury, which is just a big mid that's plus 11 on block and leads to free mix-ups. Free move into mix-up stance. Free chip damage with a jab string, etc., etc. And when they said that they were going to increase player expression, instead they got rid of the high execution input for Lee's down back 4's blazing kick, which has been in the game since Tekken 4. If I could buy to get the Tekken 4 ISO for the emulate, I'll show it on the screen right now. And so that's sort of been the gist of the issues. It's been, the game's not fun, the game's not competitive, the doubling down 50-50s. And I can tell you personally, from my perspective, the game isn't competitive in any way. The game's too random, the game's too volatile. And I almost think that there's a part of me that almost thinks they knew that, and that's why they're changing top 8 to be first to 5 instead of first to 3, because the game's so random now that, because it's just filled with 50-50s, that if it was a first to 2, it's just completely random, which it is completely random. But this game just, because of all that, it isn't competitive. So you have people at the top level, the pro level, that don't like this, because how the hell are you going to compete in this environment? It's literally just a coin flip. And I wish I could say it's an exaggeration, and I would have in Season 1, but now it's like I went to a local. I went to a local the other day just to get a feel for the tournament experience, because I felt that online, and I felt like it was important to experience that myself. And yeah, it's to a point where your wins, like, even if you win, this isn't even about losing, but even if you win, winning doesn't feel good. It's meaningless. And I almost feel like it's insulting to say that you won against anyone in this environment, because it's just so random. Like, I went down and I played against Outrain. And if you're more of an older Tekken player, then you probably know who Outrain is. You probably heard of him. And he was at that local because we're both in Michigan, and I won 2-0. it doesn't matter. I've played against L-Train multiple times before online, and when I've won against him, I feel really good about it. Here in a tournament where normally would actually matter, I just felt nothing, and I feel like it would be insulting to him to claim that means anything because of how random and dumb this game is right now. It's crazy just how little value wins have. So at that point, what's the point in playing? And then other players too who might be at low level feel the same thing because it's just spamming a bunch of 50-50 garbage and there's no counterplay to it. Even if there is, it's really difficult to do and you don't know how to do it. So you just get hit once by like a jab and then you're locked into a 50-50 for the rest of the round and it's like great. And then next round happens and then you round start jab. Ooh, I got the jab so I win the round. It's a mess. It's a complete mess. So let me tell you why the game's like this. Let me tell you the reason for every single one of these changes. This isn't something anyone's talked about, but I've really been racking my brain. I've been trying to get in their head as to why this is happening, and I think I have the answer. Compensation buffs. Compensation buffs. I'm telling you, this is the reason. So think about the changes that they did make to defense. Okay, so they improved sidestepping. That's a big thing, right? They made it so that you can sidestep into the foreground. That's something people have been talking about a lot. And that is a proper buff to defense. One of the things that they said was a buff to defense, and I don't agree with this, but this is what they said, is when you're on the ground, when you get hit 30% that damage turns into recoverable health. They said this was a buff to defense, not me. They did. One thing that I will say I think they think is a buff to defense, that's a weird sentence, is also the combo damage. Because combos have now been enhanced. More combo damage, more wall carry because of all of these tailspins, these screws and all of that, that's now in the game. And I think they interpret that as a buff to defense. Oh, you sidestep the move and you get a launcher, and that's a buff to defense. And so all of these things are compensation buffs for the defense. So I want you to think here, Steve's peekaboo stance, or Steve's Lionheart, sorry, stance transitions. Peekaboo 2, that's why I said peekaboo. That move put Steve into Lionheart super plus. So plus that you cannot interrupt the mix-up. He either gets the homing mid or he gets the high. And what's the reason for that? It's because it's a high. It's because the Tekken developers look at that move, say it's a high, so the counterplay is to duck it and then launch. That's your defense. And if you don't defend against it properly, then Steve gets rewarded with a mix-up. Look at Honor's 1-2-1-2. You've seen that with the wall and everything. Same concept. What's the way that you beat that? Well, you duck under the high, right? You duck under the jab before she does it. And that's the risk. And she's at risk now. If you do a wall rising punish and she gets launched, then she dies. That's the reason why it's there. Look at Huarong's new Flamingo move. What is it? Right Flamingo 4-3, 3-4, whatever it is. You're looking at it right now. The counterplay to that move is sidestep, one of the things they buffed. And then they buffed your reward you get out of defense with more combo damage and with more wall carry. So that's the risk. And that's why the move is so strong. It's plus on block and it's better on block than it is on hit. Because Huarong is getting rewarded for beating the opponent's defense. That's the idea. Steve's 5 Fox Fury. The reason why this move exists, let me tell you, this one might be a bit of a stretch, but let me tell you. This move exists because of the change to Oki. Not only has Oki been nerfed because of the backwards wake-up move to improve defense, but also because of the gray health that you get now for hitting the opponent on the ground. So the reason why Steve has 5 Fox Fury is a compensation buff for the Oki change. Because if Steve does a combo, does heat burst, does a wall combo, now if the opponent stays on the ground, Steve gets less damage. So if the opponent techs, he does 5 Fox Fury when the opponent wakes up, and now he gets Oki while the opponent is standing. And that, for some reason in their mind, increases play expression as a compensation buff to it. And how do you beat? What's the defense for beating it? You stay on the ground. It literally explains every single one of these changes, except for like 2 like Jack's clap. I still don't know why that's a thing, but it explains every single one. I could keep going into example after example into example, but if you look at any single one of these new moves that has like a stance transition, King's 3-2-2. Oh, the move is a plus on block. I'm interjecting here because I meant to bring this up because I think it's a really good example. But it's a plus on block move that leads him into a stance 50-50. Well, in their mind, the first hit's a high. So if you duck under and launch him, then like that's the defense against it. And so if you don't defend against it properly, King gets rewarded by doing this charge move. No. There are 2 points of interaction because if he charges the move, you can interrupt it with a jab string or a power crush. So there's 2 points. And because there's 2 points of interaction, 2 points where you can defend against it. Ooh, I accidentally tugged on my cord here. The 2 points where King, you can defend against it against King. If King is able to successfully do the move, then he should get compensated for it with a strong mix-up from stance. And don't even take my word for this. Here, I'm going to pull up real quick, right here at the screen. I'm going to pull up the Evo interview that they did where they're talking about balancing the game properly so it caters to veteran players and casuals.
でもあれよね、多分みんな分かってないのはゲームを作るときにしっかりしたキーコンセプトがあってそれを守んないとまず面白いゲームにはならないからアグレッシブというものをぶれないようにしてるでそれはある程度楽しさが担保されてでそれでまあ理不尽なとこもあるからコンセプト捨てるんじゃなくて理不尽なことを直せばいいってことですよね
理不尽なところを直したりそれを弱めたりとかですかね緩和したり
だから0-1じゃないんだよね
頻度を減らしたりって本当に
0と1だとみんな思い込んでる
でいくつだったりとか
いいバランスがあるって信じてるんだけど世の中ってこんなうまいこといかないどっちか上げたらどっちかこうなるようになってるのでじゃあ両方上がった状態って意外と中途半端なんですよそのいいところが逆になくなっちゃったりするでどっちかを上げたらこうなるわけだからその反応で見ると鉄拳8のすごく変化したところって意外と変化したことに対しての否定的な意見は割とベテランの方が多いんですよ。長くシリーズをプレイしてる人の方がやっぱそこは意外と不満が多い。で逆に鉄拳8が面白いと思ってる人例えば初心者に優しいか優しくないかって話とは全く別でその壁を越えてきて8が面白いと思ってる人は今回の8の仕組みがやっぱ気に入ってるのでだから8が面白いなって言ってるでこれをじゃあその駆け引きのバランスっていうのを、じゃあもうちょっとベテランの人寄りにしようってやったらもちろん8が面白いって言ってた人の満足度は下がるわけでここは結構トレードオフなのでまあでもそれにしてもちょっとここは極端になってるよねみたいなことをどれぐらいかってちょっと見ながらやってるってところが正直なところなのであんまりこのどっちっていうか簡単な話じゃないんだよね。そのすごい細かいメモリというかの調整をやってるって感じだよね。こんな固定のプレイヤーがこんな固定のキャラが勝つのはどうなんだってベテランの人ほど文句言ってたことが実は一番解消されてるのは8
それは間違いないです
結果から見るとそうなんだよ8なんだけど、それでも面白いことに、ベテランの人ほどこのちょっと新システムが気に入らないって言ってるってこの矛盾が面白いんだよね、だからそれはどっちを立ったらどっちが立たないみたいなやっぱ細かいバランスで成り立ってるのを俺らは割と頑張ってやってるつもりなんだけどでも e スポーツの結果から見ると結構いい俺らが思い描いた通りになってるよね。
Oh God, I think that's what their philosophy is. So this is what I think is happening. I think that in their minds, not only is their core game philosophy for balancing the game revolve around compensation buffs. So you nerf one thing, you compensate for something else. This is something that they explain in the Tekken talk with Azucena losing her Power Crush Heat Engager. Even though no character needs a compensation buff for that, that's the philosophy. They lose something, they should get something in return. A core system changes like Power Crush Heat Engager, they should get something in return. And that extends to improved defense as they look at it, improved combo damage, worse Oki, etc., etc. And the reason for this is because they think this is striking a balance between catering to the people that enjoy the game and the people that don't enjoy the game. Because for some reason, I don't even know what part of this I'm putting out, but what they said is, we don't understand why people think it's a binary system where like either it's like you buff one thing and you nerf the other thing or whatever. I don't remember exactly what they said, but the point is that they say that, but then the philosophy on it is that it is a binary system where if you cater to veteran players, then casual players don't like the game as much. So, like, if you're here, like, this is veteran players, this is casual players, you do something to appeal to the veteran players, casual players enjoy the game less. Which clearly isn't the case if you look at the review scores right now. I'm going to be so mad at myself editing this when I keep pointing back here. But, but that's, like, that's the point. That's the design philosophy. You heard it straight from their mouths. And again, when you look at all of these changes, everything, every single balance change, it all lines up, it all makes sense. And you even see this in some cases with moves that aren't nearly as good as some of these other ones. You know, like, look at Lydia, for instance. She has, like, down back 4 now. That's the compensation buff for losing Oki because it hits on the ground now, so you use it as an Oki tool. Right? That's the idea. Something like her core circle forward 4 being buffed. The reason why that was buffed to give Heat Engager now a normal hit is because of the buff to sidestepping. And they see that move as still being counterplay. Otherwise, they would have just made down forward 3+4 the mid-homing move of Heat Engager, right? But no, they still see there as counterplay. And there is, because it's very common to sidestep right and duck against Lydia neutral because you're covering her linear options like back 1, forward 4, 2, and you're covering her homing option being down back 3, and it still covers the core circle forward 4. So it's not an egregious buff. It makes sense if you're playing against someone that is using the right defensive options. Hi, I'm interjecting real quick because there's one thing I forgot to bring up, but it's Kazuya's homing mid. This is the reason why. Do you understand why that move's in the game now? I'm taking these headphones off. It's for the exact reason I'm explaining all this. Do you understand? It's a compensation buff to improve his defense against buff sidestep. That's why it's a buff to his defense as compensation for sidestep getting better because Kazuya is weak to sidestep left. It all makes sense. It all makes sense. Don't bring me down. Don't get rid of me. You know it's true. You know it's true. But even when we go into the stance mix-up philosophy, look at Yoshi's new Flea stuff. Yoshi, when he does something like up forward 1-1 to go into Flea, doesn't have a real mix-up out of Flea. And that's a bigger reason why they got rid of the unblockable when he jumps on the sword. But what he's setting up for there is for forward 2, I think it is in this game. I always get confused with SoulCalibur because it's 6A in SoulCalibur, which is a completely different input. But whatever that highest to put him in Dragonfly, because if that gets blocked, he goes into it at +7, and if he goes into it at +7, then he gets the big mix-up from Dragonfly where there's no counterplay to it. But the way that you beat that, the way you defend against it, is duck under the high. And then that gives an incentive to duck under the high, and then that's where he can use Skull Splitter, which is a mid that just gives him some plus frames on normal hit. And I just ran out of this space, great. But the problem is that they're seeing these more telegraphed moves because they're coming from a stance like Yoshimitsu's Flea, and they're equating that as the exact same thing as like Steve manually going into Peekaboo and doing Peekaboo 2, or Anna doing a drive string from neutral, or just being in situations where you can't actually see or know if the move is going to come out unless you have a hard read. There's a big difference between seeing someone go into a stance, know their options, and be able to counter it, versus them just throwing something out of neutral like King's 3-2-2. But I think the Tekken devs don't see that, and so they're treating every single one of these things the same. That's the problem. That's the issue with Season 2. And it can be fixed. Like that's the thing about this, because the philosophy generally, if you exclude all the dumb stuff, makes sense. And this is something I talked about in my video on how stance 50/50s just aren't implemented well into Tekken. The problem is that there is no real actual defensive counterplay. But you look at all these new things that they added, and there is, in theory, in their mind there is. In an actual practical setting, there isn't. But the idea is that you have to take a risk because you're doing a high and it can get ducked under, or you're doing a move that can get sidestepped, and then you get rewarded if that move is blocked with the stance mix-up. It's just the way it's executed is terrible. But there are good examples of this too, like Elisa's backup 1 being able to go into boot. This change is really cool, and I like it a lot. It's something I actually kind of wanted from the beginning, although not specifically off of this move, because backup 1 is a high that's plus on block. From backup, she doesn't have any lows. You have to go in the backup, wait a bit, get out of there, so you go into a crouching state, and then you have from crouch 1+2. So she's going into a stance that doesn't have any mix-ups. She can do this high, go into boot, get a mix-up from boot, but the low isn't very good, right? It's just this -14 dinky little thing, and Elisa can't really do anything with the frame advantage that gives, so it's not a lot of reward. It carries a bit of risk to it. It's like medium to high depending on the character, and so creative decision making and planning makes this a lot more usable. Instead of just doing the move and going into the 50/50 mix-up, instead what you can do is down back 1, go in the boot, cancel out of boot. Sorry, not down back 1. Back up 1, go in the boot, cancel out of boot, back up 1, go in the boot, opponent tries jabbing you out, back sway, and then hit boot 3, or not boot 3, back up 3, and then launch the opponent. And that is how you create a mind game and interaction with this new move that's actually interesting and healthy for the game. It's not just a bunch of mindless 50/50s, but instead it's, I'm going to keep harassing you with this plus on block move until you do something. If I have a read that you're going to do something, then I'm going to kill you for it. And if I don't think you're going to do anything, then back up 1, go in the boot, cancel, front crouch, mix up, which takes a lot of setup and is very risky because it's prone to getting counter hit or hot kicked or whatever. So there are these ideas in here. There are these cool ideas that add a lot to player expression. It's just that they don't know what the hell they're doing. They have no idea. And I think that's the saddest part about this. But it also gives me a little bit of hope that they are going to fix it. Because the core fundamental philosophy of what they're doing in this regard, I think is fine. The real problem is, 1, the compensation buffs, because characters don't need compensation buffs just because they get nerfed. And I think that's very clear. But then the other part of it too is the execution on these changes. Like, I'll tell you another one when it comes to execution. Automatic parries. This is a buff to defense. That's what they think. Like, so stuff like Steve's parry now that he gets in Lionheart, he has a mid parry in Lionheart now. That's a buff to defense. Because now it gives him a new defensive option while in the stance. Eddie's buff to handstand with the parry now. 1, people weren't building the stacks with him because they suck. So you gotta give something to give more of an incentive. Oh, let's buff his defense by making it so when he has one, he automatically parries lows and handstands. So now you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You not only give more of an incentive to build those stacks with Eddie instead of ignoring them, but also you buff his defense because now he has a new defensive ability in the stance. Of course, this sounds absolutely ridiculous and asinine, but that's what I think is going on. That's the problem, is the execution on these things. And I think that they genuinely do think they buff defense with, again, the sidestepping, the Oki thing, which, again, isn't a buff to defense, but they think it is, and the combos. I hope my little rambling here has maybe changed your perspective a little bit on what exactly they're doing. In my mind, they're not doing this out of mouse. They're not doubling down. They're not doing this because they don't care. I think, in their mind, They're trying to cater to everyone. They're trying to cater to the veterans. They're trying to listen to us. And they have no idea what the hell they're doing or how to play the game. They don't understand the fundamentals of how Tekken works or how fighting games work in general. And they don't understand the difference between a high coming out in neutral and a high coming out in stance. And this makes sense. It kind of makes sense because this is a problem with how they are internally and a problem with QA testing. And this has been a problem since the beginning. And I'm frankly not surprised that 1,500 changes in there, this many issues. It sucks playing it, but that's why I haven't been all like alarmist about everything that's going on, because I kind of expected this to happen. Look at Azucena's while running 3-2. In fact, here's the Tekken talk. Oh, I'm gonna hate myself editing this. Here's the Tekken talk. Look at that. Tell me visually that looks like it's nerfed. Tell me visually that looks like you can punish that. You can't. You can look at that visually. And if there was any QA testing on the Tekken team, they would have seen that too, but there's not. Look at all of the changes to like the bug fixes that have introduced new bugs into the game. Like, look at when they did the whole wall change thing, and then that broke the game and they had to revert it. Look at time running out when Devil Jin does his rage out against Heihachi. Look at Pulse forward 1+2 now in this patch. Look at the Jack clap. How did that get past testing? Honors back too. Honors back too. All of these things just come from a lack of internal testing and organization, and it explains all of the problems that we've seen constantly throughout this game, even going back to before the game released, with the seemingly random schedule on how they were uploading character trailers, how they implemented the battle pass, the Tekken shop, the change to Azucena's while running 3-2, the random lack of any updates in the middle of the season, the lack of organization and structure, reusing assets in the battle pass and the Tekken shop from Tekken 7, Tekken Tag 2, Tekken 6, even I don't think there was one from Tekken 5, but there might have been. And then all of the bugs in Season 2, and I could go on and on and on. And this is something that I've been saying since the beginning. There's no QA testing. Internally, something's wrong. There's no structure, there's no organization, and there's no competence. I don't even think it's their fault. It's probably something with Bandai Namco, because this is stuff that's happened with SoulCalibur in the past. When Huang, the last DLC character to come out for SoulCalibur VI, came out, it was in December. And there were no updates, there was no communication, there was nothing whatsoever from Project Soul on Huang coming out. And people were wondering if the character was ever even going to be released. And the problem isn't Project Soul, because Project Soul had communicated with the player base and they had listened to everyone and they had implemented changes based on feedback. It was a Bandai Namco thing. And I imagine the reason why is because they took everyone and moved them to work on Tekken 8 and took them off of SoulCalibur 6, so they were running on a skeleton crew. And I wouldn't be surprised if a similar thing is happening right now with the Tekken team. I don't claim to know what's going on internally at Bandai Namco, but it just everything makes sense when you think of it that way. And I think another problem too is that this is the first Tekken game that's not on arcades, and this is something people bring up a lot. But I want to add a different perspective to this, because I'm a SoulCalibur player, and the first SoulCalibur game that was console first was SoulCalibur IV. And that game was an absolute travesty. It was a failure. It was awful. No one liked it. And let me explain to you why. The reason why is because, at least at Bandai Namco, based on what Harada has said, there is this philosophy that if a game is in arcades, then you should focus on mechanics. If a game is on console, you should focus on looks and not mechanics. Because the reasoning for this is, if you put a quarter in because a game looks pretty and it plays like garbage, then you're never going to play it again. If you put in a quarter to try out a game that looks like garbage and it plays phenomenally, then you keep putting quarters in. With a console game, you won't pay $60 for a game that plays well. You'll pay $60 though for a game that looks pretty, and if you put it in and it sucks, it doesn't matter because they already got your $60. That's the general philosophy. I don't know if this is true just in general in Japan. I don't know if this is true for Bandai Namco. All I know is that this is what Harada said, and it kind of makes sense why they would think that, even if it's not true. I want you to look, I'm gonna hate myself. I want you to look behind me. This is Nubby. This is Nubby's Number Factory, a game that looks like it was made in 1987. Might be a bit of an exaggeration. Okay, 1993. And this has become a sensation. Phenomenal game. Bunch of people, so many people have bought and played this game. It was made by one developer, and it has paid for his entire college tuition. And I'm sure it's done a hell of a lot more than that at this point by now. And it's because of the gameplay. It's because we have the internet now. We have social media, we have streams. We have influencers. We have people to talk about these things. And this is why Tekken 8 right now has 9% positive recent reviews on Steam. It's because it doesn't matter if the game looks pretty. What matters is that the game sucks. And people will point that out and say that it sucks. And the graphics aren't important anymore. And this was a shortcoming even back in SoulCalibur IV's time when this stuff wasn't as prevalent. Because what SoulCalibur IV did to try to adhere to that philosophy is strip away the mechanics. Don't focus on them. If you look at SoulCalibur 1, 2, and 3, they are some of the most structurally phenomenal fighting games you will ever play. You look at SoulCalibur 1, you play SoulCalibur 1, and you would not believe that game was made in 1998. You would think that that game was made in the last 5 years. It is unbelievable what Project Soul was able to do back at that time. And I think it's a testament to just how amazing Project Soul as developers are. But the problem is that they needed to sell the game on console, and for one reason or another, whether it's Bandai Namco or Project Soul, I'm sure it was Bandai Namco, because like Harada said, the Project Soul is more competent fighting game developers than the Tekken team is. They looked at that and they said, we need to make the game look pretty to get it to sell, and it suffered for that, and that's why it's a mess. And it's not just because of Hilda and Al Goal and the awful balancing and all of that. It's because the game doesn't feel good to play. It's because they took the 8-way run system and basically removed it. They shoehorned Tekken movement into the game, and it just feels like a husk. Everything that people liked and cared about the game gone to try to cater to people that hadn't played the game before and to get it to sell on consoles because it was console first. And we see the result. And there's a similar thing going on with Tekken 8 now. Bandai Namco hasn't learned from their mistakes. They focused a lot on the visuals, making the game look pretty, cutscenes, story mode. And in terms of gameplay, there's nothing new. There's nothing innovative. What they've done is they've either taken mechanics from previous Tekken games like Power Crush and Tekken 7 and just tried to morph it so it fits into the game system, or they've taken mechanics from other games, mainly SoulCalibur VI, shoved it into Tekken 8 and crossed their fingers that it works, so you don't have to focus on developing mechanics. They don't have to use the R&D on making new mechanics for the game, and instead they can focus on the visuals and making the game look pretty. That's what it is. And how this might correlate to the internal structure of the game or whatever, I don't know. But I think that's the core underlying issue of everything that's going on. There's a reason why most of the new mechanics in Tekken 8 were taken from SoulCalibur VI. And I think that's why. And SoulCalibur VI is a testament to why this game design philosophy doesn't work. Because SoulCalibur VI is a game that people complain looked like a PS2 game, even though that's not true, but it definitely looked last generation. There was not a lot of time spent on visuals. There were no cutscenes in the game outside of a couple. You can tell when you play the game and you play through the story that the budget ran out in the single player content and the cutscenes, because if you go through Libra of Soul, there's like 3 cutscenes in there, but it's set up so that there should be a bunch more. You can tell that they ran out of money. You can tell that they ran out of time. But it's because what they focused on instead is innovation. going back to what made SoulCalibur special, going back to the old days of SoulCalibur, back SoulCalibur 1, SoulCalibur 2, SoulCalibur 3, and taking the things that the people, the community, the player base liked from the game and making a SoulCalibur game for SoulCalibur fans, making a game to sell it on its mechanics rather than its visuals. And SoulCalibur VI was the best performing SoulCalibur game since SoulCalibur 2. It is the only SoulCalibur game besides SoulCalibur 2 to be at EVO twice. And the only reason it wasn't was because the second showing was when COVID happened. So it is a testament to how this game philosophy, this design philosophy that Tekken 8 has been taking is not the right one. And the fact that they haven't learned from their mistakes, from the mistakes that SoulCalibur VI made, from everything that SoulCalibur has suffered through as a series because of Bandai Namco's own shortcomings, their own faults, their own screw-ups, and their own sabotage of the series, speaks volumes at just how poor Bandai Namco is as a company at making games and at structuring their teams to make the games. I don't think that this is a fault of the Tekken team. I think there are problems. But I think the real enemy here, the real ones that we should be blaming, based on, again, what I've seen as a SoulCalibur player, is Bandai Namco. And that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that we might not get a happy ending to this. It's unfortunate that this may be out of our hands and Harada's hands. It might be out of the Tekken team's hands, because this is something that I've seen time and time and time again with SoulCalibur. Games of success, Bandai Namco promotes people in the game, takes them out of the game, puts them in a corporate role, puts them in a different game, and then the game that they're working on dies because the people that were passionate about the game aren't there anymore. They're not working on it. And the game is working on a skeleton crew. They only have a couple of people left. It's people that don't really have a vision of the game or what they want it to be. And then the game crashes and burns and Bandai Namco goes, why did that happen? And that is why Okubo, the person that was game director on SoulCalibur VI, is now the CEO of Crygames America, not working on SoulCalibur VI. And if you've seen anything about Okubo, how he interacts with the community, his passion for SoulCalibur, even though he's not Bandai Namco anymore, you know that that's not because he wanted to leave, it's because he had to. Because of Bandai Namco. And so what I want you to take away from all of this, what I want you to take away from what I'm saying, is that it's not all doom and gloom. There is a reason why they've done it, and it's not just out of malice. It's not just because they hate us and they're trying to appeal to a player base that doesn't exist. The reason could be a multitude of things. There's a philosophy behind what they're doing. There's an idea, and there's clearly faults in how they are balancing and changing the game. But really, this probably isn't even all their fault. This is a problem with QA. This is a problem with an internal structure. This is a problem with Bandai Namco not giving them the resources that they need. Because if they were, then bugs like Pulse 4, 1+2 just wouldn't exist. And I think the thing that's really missing from Season 2 right now is the fun. Speaking of bugs, on his back 2, the most fun thing about Season 2. That bug, I spent hours today experimenting, trying new things that you can do because it's fun. And I'm sure that for more casual players too, it's fun to experiment with this. And it goes to show that the fun that you get out of a fighting game doesn't come from mix-ups. It doesn't come from 50-50s. It doesn't come from compensation. It doesn't come from the opponent having to take risks to defend, or the attacker getting rewarded a lot for beating a defender. It comes from stuff like this. It comes from what's going on behind me. Dumb, stupid things that just add something fun to the game. And that That is what Tekken 8 is missing right now, more than anything.